Yeah. So welcome everybody to the pilot episode of Gas Tank. I am Chase Schaefer, and joining me is Richard Graves, aka Tank. Basically just giving you a little insight into why we started this podcast. We wanted to start this because we both film auto racing for a living. It is our current full-time occupation.
Whether our families like it or not,
Whether our families like it or not, we are on the road a lot. We see a lot of different states, a lot of different tracks. For the most part, you and I are pretty much dirt track guys, dirt oval basically.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I grew up around. A little bit of asphalt, but mainly dirt. I mean Dixie and Rome, been going there since I was 2 years old. That's what I know.
Yeah, and the same thing for me. I grew up in Ohio, going to dirt tracks up there, Eldora, Fremont, Attica, Limaland, a lot of the Indiana stuff as well, Gas City, Kokomo. So I grew up around the non-fendered side of things. I think you have more of a late model background.
Fenders are what I've known. It's nice to see non-fender stuff every once in a while. So luckily this year I've been able to see quite a bit of that.
So was that something that you grew into as a kid, or was you just always been at the track, or did your dad race, or kind of like give us a little bit of background about how you got to love this sport?
Well, my dad, they started taking me when I was 2 years old to Dixie Speedway, and just kind of grew up around there, always wanted to race, got a chance to do that, was not really any good, so luckily sold off those cars, found out I'm better behind a camera, prettier behind a camera, and I've just stuck with it. I mean, I've worked on them, I've helped build them, set them up. I love it.
Yeah, so my background's a little bit fairly similar, but for the most part, my dad raced sprint cars when I was a kid. I mean, I have pictures of me at the track when I was probably months old, being taken around the racetrack. Dad raced sprint cars, like I said. I've seen a lot of sprints on dirt, sod. He ran some all-star races when I got older. Ran for points at Butler Motor Speedway up in Michigan, Attica, and Fremont sometimes, but he raced a lot at the old Bryan Motor Speedway. That one's now defunct, but so we both pretty much grew up in this sport, and one of the things that we talked about when we got together and finally both started filming racing for a living is that this was something we wanted to do, kind of a weekly podcast where we could sit and talk about our experiences, not only just as cameramen, but talk about racing as a whole and kind of give you our thoughts on things that happen and kind of keep you up to date on some of the things that are going on in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way we get a chance to go see a lot of tracks a lot of people may want to go to, but they're not sure if they want to or what's in the area that they could do. To go around the racetrack. I mean, I've been following the Living Like Outlaws guy, and every time he recommends a place to eat, whenever I go to a track, I go back and search for that track and where he's been eating at, and, if it wasn't for anything like that, I wouldn't have eaten there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things about being a dirt track in this day and age that's so great is that word of mouth carries so much further in the day of social media and internet. You used to have to bump into somebody. I mean, back in the 90s when I was a kid, it was like, hey, do we know anybody who's ever been to Knoxville, Iowa before? Oh, we know a handful of guys. Okay, well, what's some places that we need to go when we go out for the Knoxville Nationals? Maybe one person had been before or a handful of people. I mean, I was just from a little farm town in Ohio, so not many people got to go outside of the state to travel to some of these cool dirt tracks, and so it was more difficult to kind of plan your trip. But now that we've got social media, you've got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all this stuff to where people can reach out and be like, hey, if you're ever in this area, and one of the guys that really does a good job about this is Steve Post.
Yes.
Like if you follow Steve Post, he's always giving you great food recommendations, and he and Aaron Evernham have that great sprint car racing podcast on MRN Networks, but he really does a good job of being an ambassador to the sport. I mean, like, go here, see this stuff. If you go to this track, eat something like this. And I think in this day and age, that's something that really helps the average race fan when they're deciding where to go for a race.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I like to eat at small-town food joints. I want to help the locals out just as much, and plus, the food's a lot better than going to your fast food places. We get tired of fast food being on the road. We want a nice, local sit-down place. And so if we can find that place, we want to let y'all know, hey, y'all got to check this out, because this is some good eats. I mean, my body shows I like eating.
So to kind of break the ice with this, what's one place, if you can think of one in particular, what is a 100%er? Every time you go to this racetrack, whatever that racetrack is, do you have a place that is a 100%er? You're going to go to that restaurant every time you go to that particular track.
What is Eldora? What is that? The Whistle Stop or whatever? Right there by the train tracks?
Yeah, right there in Ansonia.
Yes, that is, like, when I come in, that is where I'm going. That is my first stop when I go to Eldora, is going there. And usually it's my last stop when I'm leaving. You know, like if I'm leaving out the next afternoon, I'm eating there to go because it'll be a few months before I even get a chance to be back up in that area.
Yeah, and another great thing about the Whistle Stop up there in Eldora is they are great ambassadors for dirt track racing in general. They have a wrapped car that was out at the Million this year.
Oh, nice.
And the Dream. So they had a wrapped car that was out there. They do a lot of good things for dirt track racing. So if you ever actually get to go up to Eldora, if it's your first time up there, go ahead and stop in the Whistle Stop Cafe. Another good place up there is the Sure Shot Tap House, for those of you who like a beverage every now and then. But they have a lot of stuff on tap for the race fans, and there's a lot of good places up there that really support that speedway. And I think that's one of the things that's important, too, to keep this sport alive, is having a community that rallies around and supports its local dirt tracks. We see a lot of times when we're on the road where dirt tracks don't necessarily have that support of the community, and it's just kind of like one wrong move, and the community is going to swoop in, and that'll kind of be the end of the track.
Yeah, there's a few fairground areas that there was one in Pennsylvania that a lot of people were worried about. Bloomington, I believe, was the fairground, and I guess they've had some issues with the neighbors. Now, it's a beautiful facility, awesome fairground, great fairground foods when I was there, but there's houses just on the backside of the fairground, and those were the ones making complaints where, like, you go to Port Royal, they're like,
yeah, their house is literally in turn 2.
Yeah, I'm jealous because I want to watch from those houses and enjoy my beverage from, you know, the second story. But and they don't really complain as much. The track gives tickets to some of those people, and I think that's an awesome way to say, hey, look, thanks for putting up with us. Here you go. Yeah. Come enjoy.
So let's jump into the next segment, Tank. One of the things we want to do on this show is kind of give people an idea of where we get to go on a regular basis. Last week, where were you at racing-wise?
Oh, my gosh. I left here Thursday, 2 Thursdays ago, actually, left here, popped in at Sonoya for a quick bit, drove through the night, went to Farmer City in Illinois, then Spoon River canceled, so then I headed towards Thunderbird, which then got rained out, which was over in Michigan, then headed back towards Boone, Iowa to go do that race for the World of Outlaws, then Davenport, awesome fairground area. Had a day off, I-70, which they have turned that place into an awesome facility. Oh my gosh, I was so surprised. And then finished up Saturday night at Knoxville.
So you were on the road a lot. I just got done last weekend with the final leg of the Schaefer's Oil Southern Nationals Tour. If you get a chance to follow that tour, it's a fun one. They don't pull, they're not going to pull 40, 45 late models, but it's going to be a quality field with the 25 to 30 that they hit on a regular basis. I mean, they go to some cool tracks too, and one of the things that we kind of judge cool tracks on is, you know, their facilities. You know, I was really pleased with Wythe Raceway. When I got to Wythe, you know, the racing's not bad there. We got to see in the Spring Nationals earlier this year a last lap pass by Brandon Overton on Jonathan Davenport at that place. But, you know, for the fan, a lot of this stuff is not just about the racing per se in general. A lot of it is about the facility. And Wythe, you know, it was one of those places where you walked in and the restrooms were immaculate. And that's probably one of the more underrated amenities at a racetrack. Is one thing that people really need to know is, you know, where can I go use the restroom at? Are the restrooms clean? Are the soap dispensers full? Are there paper towels there? So a quick shout out to Wythe, because that was their top amenity. You had a clean place to use the restroom, and I think that means a lot to fans who are deciding whether they want to go out to that racetrack or not, or if they go out to that racetrack and they decide they want to come back. So I just got done with the Schaefer's Oil Southern Nationals Tour. We finished this weekend up. We started Thursday night. Where were we? At Brasstown over at Tri-County Raceway. And that was a pretty good night until the rain moved in, and David Payne ended up winning a rain-shortened feature as I'm standing there in the infield getting absolutely dumped on because I wasn't smart enough to bring a bag for my camera, so I had to run and take shelter in the tech shack. And then we ended up losing Boyd's because Boyd's, unfortunately, when it rains, Boyd's has some drainage issues there, so we lost Boyd.
Right behind the track.
Yep, and so whenever it rains, Boyd's probably just needs to start running boat races up there in the parking lot because it gets wet up there. So Boyd's ended up canceling Friday morning. I kind of took the day off, went to go see my family who was camping at a campground nearby, and then shot back up to Athens, Tennessee to stay in my hotel. Woke up the next morning and made the trip up to one of my favorite tracks, Tazewell. Tazewell is a lot of fun. They pack that place out every time I've been there. I've never had a bad time. I've seen some races that were like, nah, that was okay, but I've never had a bad time at Tazewell. They pack the place out. The concessions are pretty good. The people there are really good. If you ever get a chance to run into Brady Cup up there, who's the announcer, he's a great guy. It's a fun facility to go film a race at. And that's ironic because it's probably one of the few facilities that we go to that doesn't really have a place for a cameraman to set up. So you set up at the top of the crowd, and you get to be immersed in the experience with the fans all night. And the track is banked to the oblivion. If you've ever seen a video of it, go watch it. Go watch videos of people trying to get in and out of the infield pits at Tazewell. The banking in those turns is so steep. I think every time somebody goes through there with a trailer, it bottoms out, catching the lip going down into the pit area.
Well, it's just picture Bristol as it is with dirt. Not the adding dirt to Bristol, but Bristol now with its 36 degrees of banking, it's somewhere along those lines. Like when I went there for the first time this year, I knew it was steep, but until I, got to the top of where you exit a turn 2, which is where you enter into the pits, and finally saw that it's like 2.5 to 3 stories tall of banking. It was so wild, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be fun. And when I was filming them, I thought my camera was glitching how fast they move and adjusted those cars.
Yeah, it's a cool place, and Dale McDowell ended up pulling up and getting the win. One of the things that I thought was interesting is Dale didn't kind of stick with the series this year. He won 2 of the first 3 nights, and then we really didn't see him again until Tazewell.
Well, no, he wanted to go hit I-80. I mean, everybody knows what's going on with I-80. Yep. And you had the Silver Dollar Nationals, last one being held there. So he hit that, which, I mean, I would have done the same thing. I mean, it's a jewel. I mean, they put on a heck of a show, and then he kind of came down while I was at Boone. Some of the guys stopped there. And so he happened to show up, didn't make the show, so he just went ahead and came on home. But, I mean, when you got that jewel that's the last time, I would want to hit it too.
Yeah, I completely understand. But since Dale McDowell decided not to finish out the series, that made Corey Hedgecock the series champion. He had a fantastic Southern Nationals as well. So I don't want that to come off as like we're coming down and saying that, well, Corey only won because Dale was there. Corey won because Corey was really, really good the entire time at Southern Nationals. Had a couple of wins there, did a fantastic job. Ended up, I think he got in the dust up that last night at Tazewell and lost a tire and had to go back to the back. He wasn't too thrilled about it in his victory lane interview, or his championship interview, but he still ended up being the champion of what I think is probably one of the more underrated mini-series in the country.
It is a great regional series, and I mean, you also got to give it up to Will Rowland. Won Rookie of the Year championship with the Summer Nationals.
Second in points overall.
But it was that one position that Hedgecock gained is what won him that championship. That's how close the Rookie of the Year was to winning the championship as well.
Yeah, and we saw that on the spring tour as well as Carson Ferguson. He did a fantastic job. Came out to the Southern Nationals tour. Didn't have a very easy time. He had a win and did a pretty good job, but wasn't as consistent as he was during the spring Nationals where he was on a complete tear. And so he was very consistent in the spring stuff. Would have liked to see that a little bit more in the summer, but still a quality outing with the Ray Cook stuff. And so that kind of leads us into our next segment. One of the things that we really want to talk about, like we said earlier, we're 2 guys that just film racing for a living. That's all we do. We go around from track to track to track, just live streaming auto racing as camera operators. So one of the things that we thought would be a good topic to talk about on our first episode was how streaming has kind of impacted the sport. You go to dirt tracks around the country, and everybody kind of has a different opinion on it. Some people think that streaming is fantastic, and it's helped the sport out a lot. And then there's people all the way down the spectrum who think, streaming is the devil and it's going to be the death of dirt track racing as we know it. So that's one of the things that we kind of wanted to talk about here. So Tank, I'll kind of let you kick that off, and then we'll go back and forth a little bit.
Well, the way I see it, if it wasn't for streaming, I would not have known that I wanted to go to Farmer City, Boone, Falls. I mean, those are some great tracks. If it wasn't for what I'm watching on my computer to follow certain drivers around, I would not have known that those shows put on great races. I mean, at Farmer City, 3 races were decided within the last couple laps. That coming off turn 4, oh my gosh. I did not believe, I thought the leader of the street stock race had checked out. Well, all of a sudden, here comes Meg, and she's coming back. And I mean, almost got the win off of turn 4, final turn of the race. Super late models, exact same way. I mean, if it wasn't for watching stuff like that already, I would not have known that's the track I needed to go to. Just even as a fan, I wanted to go there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about streaming is that opens up people who, maybe live in red clay territory down here in the South where we are. We're located in Georgia. People who have lived in red clay country their entire lives have been going to red clay dirt tracks, and now they take a look at some of that farm dirt up there and they think, man, I got to get up there and see some of that Illinois, that black Illinois dirt and see some racing up there because that looks like a lot of fun as well. And I'm of the same opinion. When Flow Racing did the Illinois Speed Week, I thought, man, I've got to get up there and see some of those Illinois racetracks. That looks like a lot of fun. We hear a lot about it on Summer Nationals and Hell Tour and all that, but when you see them kind of race at each of those tracks every night, and you see the local guys who have been running it for a while, those shorter tracks seem to be a really great equalizer.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you don't just see, don't write it in stone. Davenport, Madden, it's not going to be, the big 2 or 3 every night. It's going to be guys who have experience working around bull rings who can get in that black dirt and make something happen.
No, I totally agree. And then also, from being from red clay area, we don't get a lot of sprints. Now, I love sprints. I mean, we get the USCS, which they usually put on a great show, but I get to see them once or twice a year. But this year, I've always been able to watch on Flow, the All-Star Circuit of Champions. But then I got to see the facilities they were going to. Then I got to go to them.
Yep.
And I was like, they gave me a list, and usually whenever they're like, hey, can you hit this track? And I see the other tracks on it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got some bucket list tracks that are on this run. And I'm just like, I'm fanboying over these racetracks because I've watched them for years due to streaming.
Yeah, and it helps people like myself who are from sprint car country, but now, like you said, we get a 360 show once or twice every year that's within decent driving distance. I mean, not that they're not good, not that I won't go watch them, but I do miss those ground-pounding 410s sometimes that, you get to see with the All-Star Circuit of Champions. If you subscribe to Dirt Vision, you get to see the World of Outlaws. But I miss watching the sprint car stuff sometimes, and even the USAC. I love non-wing sprint cars. I love sprint cars in general. I'm a big sprint car guy, but I don't get to see them too much now living in Georgia, and especially filming down in the South. And live streaming, a lot of my stuff ends up being Fender cars and late models, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I get to, it's either adapt or die.
Yep.
You either start liking them or you don't get to go to the racetrack anymore, and that's not an option. So streaming really helps people who have moved or relocated away from the type of dirt track racing they like to see consume that product. And on the flip side of that, I can understand the position that some people take when they say, well, if everybody just stays home and watches it, they're not going to come out to the track. I can sort of understand that, but one of the things that I'm a diehard, I'll beat this drum all day. Streaming should never be a primary source of consumption for dirt track racing. No. Streaming, to me, I have always viewed as a supplementary way to consume my dirt track racing. Yeah. If I'm ever given the chance where a big race is happening 15 minutes from my house, I'm 100% going to that race. And I think that's something that we saw last year at Dixie Speedway.
Oh, gosh. They packed out.
Yeah, where the Lucas Oil guys came to town, and I mean, I hadn't seen Dixie that full in a long time. They had, with support classes included, they had to have close to 260 cars that night.
I think the official count was 203 cars through all classes. Now, that's only 7 classes.
Yeah.
203 cars.
Yeah, and not including the guys who jumped out in like limiteds and tried to run with the Lucas Oil Show. You know, as fans, if you live 10 minutes from that track, which Dixie is in a very populated area, so there's a lot of people who live within 10 minutes of that racetrack. I don't know how many of them would have said, "No, I'm just going to stay home. I'm just going to stay home and watch it on Mad TV."
Not me.
The place was packed.
I'm going to a racetrack. Like, if I have the chance, unless I've promised my wife that, yeah, we're not doing anything racing related, I will find my way to a racetrack. I don't care if it's streaming or whatever. There's nothing better than experiencing the dirt, mixing it with your food and drink. It adds flavor. It's like Flavor Town, you know. Guy Fieri needs to come check this out. Add some Georgia red clay onto that corn dog. Bam. It's got some good eats. But, I mean, I'm going to be there. Yeah. It's not going to stop me. If what will stop me is like, okay, it got rained out. They're not running.
Yep.
Then I will find a show to watch because I can't make it there.
Right, so then it comes down to, do I just not watch racing because I can't make it out to my local track? Well, no. One of the things that streaming has done is now when things happen that are outside of our control, or where we are specifically saying, hey, I'm going to spend some family time with my wife and kids, or my wife or significant other, or whomever you want to spend that time with, that you're intentionally taking time out of your day to go see, that's when it becomes helpful.
Yeah.
Like, I have a Flow Racing subscription. I don't get to use it very often because I'm usually out there working for them. But on weekends where I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay home and spend some time with my wife and kids, well, my wife and kids go to bed eventually, and I stay up late because we're at some of these racetracks till the early hours of the morning, so it just helps to keep your internal clock going. But I will sit up, I will turn on Flow Racing, I will turn on Dirt Vision, I'll see something that piques my interest, and I'll watch it then. I can't just get up and go to Weed Sport on a Monday night.
No.
But I can get up and get on my couch and, you know, get a glass of water, get something to eat, and I can sit down and I can watch the World of Outlaws at Weed Sport. So it opens up a whole range of viewers to your facility. And we got a chance to talk to Ricky Stenhouse Jr. about that last year at Woodstock, or at Dixie. And we asked him during the one sprint car show we got to see that year. I asked him, I said, you know, is this the golden age of dirt track racing fandom? And he said, yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that we both kind of reminisced about was getting the Speed Sport. Yeah. You wouldn't know who won last week until you went to the next track the next week, pulled up the old Speed Sport, and was like, oh, that's who won the 305 feature at Fremont.
Now these are the points. You know?
Yeah, now these are the points. You didn't know, but now that information is just so fast, and you can tune in. You can even watch local shows on streaming now. One of my home tracks, Attica Raceway Park, they've got their weekly Friday night shows on Dirt Vision. So if I ever get homesick and say, hey, what's going on with that 305 series up at Attica, which, if you ever get a chance to go to Attica, that's a good series. Those 305s put on a very good show up at Attica.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm very much in the camp that streaming does a lot of good for dirt track racing. Certainly more eyes on the sport than ever before.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, it helped me know where my bucket list tracks needed to be.
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows about Port Royal and Knoxville, which are great facilities. You cannot take anything away from that. But Farmer City, never knew what it was going to bring.
Mm-hmm.
But, oh my gosh, like, just watching the racing, I knew I needed to be there.
Yeah.
Falls, knew I needed to be there. And I hope people think the same thing, like when they've watched Dixie Speedway and Rome Speedway and Sonoya. Like, Sonoya, one of my favorite tracks in the region.
Yep.
I love going there. I've been lucky enough to be able to film there, be a fan there, work on race cars there. I just love what they've done to the facility.
Yeah.
You can't see everything that we're seeing from behind the camera, but hopefully the racing tells you, I need to go watch a race there.
Yeah, and Sonoya's becoming probably one of the premier racetracks in the Southeast. I mean, they've got that 50,000 to win Peach State Classic that comes up at, November, the second weekend in November, looking at the calendar.
Yeah, 11th and 12th.
Got to do that one last year. It was pretty fun. The place was packed, and it was cold too. We were pretty chilly, but we had a good time. Kyle Bronson won that first night, and then Chris Madden ended up winning the $50,000 to win feature night, but it was packed out. They had all the big names there. You had Overton, you had Davenport, Marlar, Madden. I mean, everybody was, Tyler Erb was there. You had everybody there who fans would want to see. And it's because of things like streaming where they put stuff together like that we can get these guys to these local tracks that just need a little bit more viewership and some more eyes on them for people to realize that, hey, this might be a place that we need to go. They've got a fast track. And I think that's one of the things that Flow Racing Night in America has done a really good job of too, is taking you to these tracks that put on these good shows and then bringing them to a national spotlight to where you're just like, if you've never been to 411 before, here's why you need to go to 411. If you've never been to Marshalltown before, here's why you need to go to Marshalltown. And so it's a chance for these tracks to put on an exhibition for these fans. But I think kind of where the negative perception comes from, and you hear it a lot mostly from people who work the tracks.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't heard too many fans say that they think streaming is going to kind of be the end of dirt track racing as we know it. It usually kind of comes from, people who actually run the dirt tracks, sort of. But the issue is that I think is one of the reasons that they think it's hurting the sport is because when places get a chance to showcase their facility and they just lay an egg.
Oh, yes.
I've seen that a couple times this year. I don't want to get too deep into places where, I don't want to call too many people out here, but we've been to some tracks, and I've been to some tracks this year. I did a Speed Week show in Ohio where, from the moment we hit the gate, one of the people that worked at that track was just like, we don't like streaming, guys. We don't really care for you being here because you guys are hurting the sport. And you're like, okay, well, I love this track. I grew up at this track, so, how is getting eyes on this place going to hurt this place? Because I had memories of that place growing up, and I thought, man, well, I love this track. This is a great track. And then I got there, and I was like, oh, what have you done with this place? And it's just the track was dry, and it was very hostile, and the track was rough, and they didn't seem to think anything was wrong with it. They were just like, oh, this is how it always is. And like, man, this is your chance to be on, this is your chance to showcase your product to the nation. And that's,
some more people.
Yeah. And you kind of laid an egg. And then the other thing too is they packed out the grandstands. The place was full. It was almost a sellout. The anticipation to get back to this place was incredible. Everybody was there. The place was packed. And then there were people watching on Flow, and you put that product out.
There is a fine line. You got to run a consistent, nice show. And I think that's where a lot of the World of Outlaws, when they do their shows, there's that one sport class, maybe two, depending on the track, and agreements. You don't have to run every class you got.
Right.
You want to be quick and efficient because guess what? I don't want to go to a track where I'm leaving at 3 a.m. every morning or every Saturday, Sunday morning where that's the norm.
Yeah.
We know things happen, where rainstorm might come in and that slows it down.
Yep.
You might have a red flag that will slow the show down. If you're going to, when you've only got 5 features to run and a couple B mains on a day, it shouldn't take 10 hours to run those races.
No.
Being just smooth helps out so much, and being efficient and not having a lot of downtime. I mean, we're in the age of technology to where if somebody gets bored, they're picking up their phone, they're not even paying attention, they could miss a heck of a show because they've already got past the point of even caring anymore.
Yeah, and for fans, which is at the end of the day who are ultimately trying to keep coming back to the racetracks, for fans, when you run an efficient program, that means so much to people who take time, especially to come out of town. Maybe not the people who are staying in hotels nearby, but that person who's thinking, I live 2.5, 3 hours from this racetrack. Is it worth me getting into the car and going to drive there if I know I'm not going to be back at my house till 5 o'clock in the morning? So an efficient program means a lot to people. And if if you're telling me that the reason people don't like, or the reason that streaming is hurting your racetrack, if you're telling me that streaming is hurting your racetrack, and I go to your track and stream, and I don't get done and packed up till 4 o'clock in the morning, I feel like that's malarkey.
Yeah, that's very tough to do. I mean, I've been spoiled. Dixie, Rome, they have always run just efficient. Sonoya, they're running efficient. Talladega, they're running efficient now. And it's just because, I mean, we would start at 7 o'clock at Dixie, have 132 to 200 cars.
Yeah.
I mean, a regular week was 130-car average, and we would be done before midnight.
Yeah.
Qualifying, hot laps, and features.
Yeah.
I mean, I got spoiled.
Well, and for me, it was a culture shock. I moved down to Georgia in 2006. I lived at a place where 5 support classes was unheard of. Running local shows for points up at Attica and Butler and Fremont, you just 3 classes.
Yeah.
Sprints, late model, street stocks, or some variation on the last one of street stocks, street cars, or something like that, or dirt trucks. But 3 classes and we were out of there. And Attica would run, still does run, probably one of the most efficient programs in the country, where they're in and they're out. I think I can remember several times getting out of some tracks up in Ohio at like 10:30 at night. Like, we've run all the features, we've run all the qualifying, we've had full programs, heat racing for support classes, and we're still out of there by 10:30. I mean, you don't have to have 7 classes of cars to put on a good show. Fans will come and watch that anyway. And if you're running an efficient program, and I may be talking out of my rear end here, because dirt track racing in the Midwest versus in the South are 2 completely different scenes.
They are.
So I don't know what the justification is for that many support classes. Maybe we could have somebody come on one day and kind of tell us or explain to us why that's how business is done down here as opposed to how it's done up in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And
that would be good.
I would like to have that conversation with somebody, or somebody even in our comments could kind of open that up and explain it to us in a way other than making backgate money.
Yeah.
So I would be interested in hearing that. But it was a big culture shock for me, coming from the Midwest down to Georgia and being like, what are all these cars that look the exact same as all the other cars? And it's like, oh, engines and shocks are the difference. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I am from sprint car country. We run 410s and we run 360s and we run 305s, but, we don't run them all together at the same night. But I was really shocked to come down here and just be like, man, we're singing the national anthem at 11 o'clock at night. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, that's tough when you're going that far into the night before you're even getting to the features. I mean, just coming off the Midwest runs, I've been able to spend a lot of my year this year in Pennsylvania, Ohio,
Yep.
and Illinois, Iowa. And it is wild to watch, 2 or 3 classes, because that's not how I grew up. I grew up
Yeah.
with a multi-class setup, and I know part of the reason for down here running multiple late models, it's hard to find an old Jeep body.
Yeah.
Because when, back in the 90s and stuff, when scrap metal hit its pricing and they were all sitting in the junkyards were getting rid of all that old stock to bring in new stock as all these cars changed. So I know that was part of the reason. I do believe it is a little overkill now. I would love to see a Southern street stock class really take hold down here. I love the 8-inch wide tires that the modifieds are starting to come back. I love that. But, yeah, I got spoiled out there.
Yeah, it was different, and I got to go back home to Ohio to do one of my favorite shows, which is Ohio Speed Week. That was a really fun tour. I like that, and it was nice. We went in, we had the 410s with the All-Star Circuit of Champions, and then I think nearly every night we had basically like modifieds, pretty much.
Yep.
I know at Lima we had modifieds. Portsmouth, the finale was interesting because we had 410s, but we also had super late models, and it was a dual show between Chris Tilley's Ironman series and the All-Star Circuit of Champions.
So you get a little bit of best of both worlds.
So that was a lot of fun to see, and I think Michael Chilton won the late model show there, and then Brent Marks won the sprint car show, and that was a lot of fun. Another interesting thing as cameramen is we kind of get to be, especially when we shoot infield, We get to be up close and personal with these guys when they're having these huge moments, these triumphant moments. I mean, I kind of joked. I said, I'm going to have to get like a raincoat out every time Justin Peck wins a race because he's Stone Cold Steve Austin's my camera with a can of beer every time he hops out of the sprint car, and I got to look right up into him coming up over the top wing as he cracks open a cold one and basically pours it down the mouth of my camera.
Well, just open up your mouth too, and get a little bit of that. That's kind of your reward as well for. I mean, being that infield camera is tough. I mean, that's a lot of movement, a lot of time on your legs, and.
But I think it's one of my favorite places to film from. I'm a big infield guy, so I've met some people who are like, oh, I don't want to film infield. I like filming infield. One of the things at some of these tracks is you're right there. When you stand down in turn 3, there's some places where you could almost reach out and shake hands with these guys as they come by you, and that's a big thing for me because you can never, like we said earlier, you can't replicate that experience through a television or through a computer screen, which is why I've always been of the camp that streaming is helpful and streaming is beneficial, but it has to be for fans the supplementary way that you consume your dirt track racing. And promoters can kind of help out in this regard too. It's like, have a kids night or something. Have something where a couple drivers maybe pull a car up or something on the side of the track before you start your racing action. Have these autograph sections. Have these things that make people think, okay, I'm going out there and I'm getting the most bang for my buck. The tracks are going to give me some entertainment value out of this. My kids, the next generation of dirt track racing fans who are just as important as the current generation, if not more important than the current generation of dirt track fans, you get them out there, you get them to see these cars, they romanticize it, they fall in love with it, and when they become adults, it becomes a nostalgic thing to them. Every time I go to the racetrack and they fire up those cars, like I'm 9 years old again.
Yes, you never lose that feeling.
No, I'm 9 years old again, sitting at the 1999 Kings Royal.
Ooh, I'm jealous.
Seeing Sammy Swindell, Steve Kinzer, and all these guys, Jack Hodenshield, all these guys who are larger than life, and then you get to go to places like Wayne County, which is where the Hodenshields are from, and you get to see Jack just walking around. Like I did Speed Week this year, and I was the infield camera at Wayne County, and Jack's walking through, and I'm like, guys, Jack Hodenshield's here. And they're like, yeah, he lives here. I was like, well, this is awesome. Let me go ahead and get a shot of him, put him up live on television. And as you get older, at least I know I do, I look at racing through a very nostalgic and romanticized lens. I don't know about you, but whenever I go to the racetrack, it makes me feel closer to my family. It makes me feel closer to, the person that I want to be at the end of the day. It makes me feel like it really transports me back in time, and it just makes me fall in love with the sport over and over again every time I go out there.
I agree with that. I mean, Dixie is 30 minutes away from us.
Yep.
Every time I go there, I feel like a kid again. Because
Yep.
I remember, and one of my favorite shots, I think, was last year, I just took with my phone, was all the kids running up to the fence. Because I remember being that kid. And I love seeing that because they just had all that little energy going, and there was a buzz in the air, and I feel that every time. It doesn't matter what track I go to, especially if it's a new track.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, okay, I try to learn a little bit of history. Like, when was it made? Just like Beckley. The front stretch used to be the back stretch. They pulled the Bristol and all of that. It was started building in 1959, I think, ran the first race in 1960, and then I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, and here we are again, this many years later, watching a heck of a show.
Yeah, and that was for me when I got to go up to the Million at Eldora. It was just like, I have spent so much time at this racetrack, and every time I come back to Eldora, it is just such a big deal. I mean, I grew up at Eldora, and for me, Eldora was always kind of the benchmark. So one thing that I guess kind of did me dirty was thinking when I moved to Georgia that every track in the United States was like Eldora or like Fremont or like Attica, and you find out pretty quickly that's not necessarily the case. Not exactly through any fault of anything somebody's doing, but everywhere can't be Eldora.
No. Eldora has set a standard, and they've done it for so many years. And it's because they're constantly improving. They're always making a change, and it doesn't matter, if it's through Tony Stewart or Earl Baltus. I hope I got his name right.
Yeah.
Did I get that?
Yeah.
Okay. I always used to get his last name incorrect. But they were always making, and it could be just little subtle changes, but it was improvements, and you would slowly notice them over and over. And that's where Sonoya and Talladega have all been doing that. And I think more tracks can do that. Boyd's has started doing that.
Yeah, Boyd's has gotten really good lately.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed the last couple races I've got to see at Boyd's.
I haven't had a chance to go there this year because I've been everywhere else but here. So hopefully I get to go there later this fall.
The Spring National Show wasn't bad. I actually had a really good time filming that one, the Spring National Show. For a camera guy, it's a little bit of a different setup since we have to film from turn one. But, it's still becoming a fun track nonetheless. It's right there in the heart of Chattanooga, so there's, before the races, you have no shortage of things to do. But a lot of tracks, at least they kind of want to keep up with the times. You see tracks that are trying and making them changes and making improvements, and I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. Is everything doesn't have to work, but you're trying to get these fans back out to the racetrack. You can't throw the fans the same thing every single year and expect them to just keep constantly coming back for it. I mean, you have to kind of tweak it a little bit. Now, there's places that just run special shows, and it's a pretty set schedule, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they do things where they put in amenities. They keep their restrooms clean. They have good concession stands. They're efficient with their concession stand lines. They do a good job of making that experience a good experience. Because, there's places we've gone where we're shooting, and we're like, man, I really need to go to the restroom, but I'm not going in those restrooms. It's like how much.
I got a good one.
It's like how much longer is this race? Your legs sitting there shaking, and you're like, man, we've only got one more feature, and I can go back to the hotel room and use the restroom.
Oh no, it's a red flag. No.
Yeah.
We went to one track this year. Won't name the track. Won't even name who we were with. And everybody was shocked that they finally put on stall doors.
Oh man.
Like everybody was so happy. Fans, crew. I'm like, that's bad.
Yeah, that we were excited about something like that. Like, and I talked about width earlier. Like the restrooms at that place, that was the first time I had been to a dirt track, any dirt track, and was like, okay, this is a good like this is a solid restroom right here, and it was clean. The floors were mopped. The toilets had just been like bleached. I mean, you could still kind of smell the bleach in the room, and everything was clean. Toilet paper was full. Towels were full. Soap dispenser was full. Sinks were clean. There wasn't junk laying all over the floor. It wasn't just some random trough that you urinated in where it can splash back on you. I mean, it was a solid facility, and that's one of the things. All right, that was one of the things that really drove it home for me. But anyway, I think our time has come to a close. We'll go ahead and end it on this. This has been the pilot episode of Gas Tank. We hope you guys enjoyed. We have plenty more things to come, and hopefully this show turns into something where it's not just two guys randomly babbling for an hour and forcing you to listen to it, or not forcing you to listen to it, because you can click the X button. But hopefully in the near future, we have a lot of cool things on tap and coming up, and we just want to create this podcast to share our love of this sport with y'all and give you ideas of some facilities you haven't thought of before, and look at dirt track racing through the lens of some guys who film it for a living. Yeah. So, in closing, I'm Chase Schaefer, and what's your final thoughts before we get out of here, Tank?
I think we're going to give a lot of great insight into why people should go to the tracks that we film.
Yeah.
Because we're finding out the same way, like, oh my gosh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But I think we should cover at least one track a week that we've been to.
Oh, yeah.
And talk about the food, the facility, show.
Well, I think I got mine in today.
Yeah, but I mean specific,
yeah.
We could take a little one-on-one. What's in the area?
This is not a podcast sponsored by With Raceway. I just had a good time there.
No, I understand. It's like when I went to Mountain View. Oh my God. Yeah. Bathrooms had AC.
Oh, yeah.
It was 100 and something degrees there, and I spent time in the bathroom to cool off.
Oh, yeah.
But, no, I think we should get some good insights.
And we're just two dirt track fans. At the end of the day, yes, we film, and we're part of the, I guess, streaming monster. But at the end of the day, we're still dirt track racing fans. We have both been fans of this sport from birth. We're going to branch out a little bit this year and get out of our comfort zone and do a little drag racing. Yep. I think Tank's done some already.
Yeah, I did one episode.
And I've got some drag racing stuff in the fall, so maybe we can tiptoe into that a little bit. But we're dirt guys at heart.
Oh, yes.
And so that's going to be our primary focus here. We just want you guys along for the journey. Hit subscribe. We'll come out with some more episodes. This has been the pilot episode of Gas Tank. I am Chase Schaefer. Richard Graves, a.k.a. Tank.
Yep. Let's have a good day.
Have a good day, y'all.